Alright, let's be honest. Dead by Daylight can be stressful. You haven't survived in 6 games, you have no clue what your teammates are doing, Meg won't get out of that bush, missed skill checks are blowing up gens left and right like it's the 4th of July. You know what I'm talking about. But what if I told you it doesn't have to be that bad? With just a few pieces of game knowledge, your chances of survival will skyrocket, or your money back. I'm just kidding, no refunds. Alright, that's enough chit chat, let's dive right in and talk about the 7 tips to not suck at Survivor and Dead by Daylight. Tip number 1, always be doing something. When it comes to a match in Dead by Daylight, every second counts. So you want to be efficient with your time because if you're not doing something, the killer certainly is. Whether it's getting on a gen, healing a teammate, going for a save, doing some annoying passive thing like Pinhead's box, you should almost always be doing something. There are some exceptions to this, but generally speaking, you want to use your time wisely. Tip numero dos. Don't walk at the start of a match. Or in other words, don't walk everywhere. The sooner you get on a gen, the sooner you can escape. And you gotta remember, the killer is on the other side of the map at the beginning of a trial, generally speaking, and the offering Vigo Shroud can ensure this is the case. The scratch marks you make from running to a gen at the start of a match will most likely be gone by the time the killer gets to you. But I would say that if you don't find a gen within the first 10 seconds of the match, then you should probably stop running around. Because by that time, the killer will have closed the distance and then your scratch marks will become an issue. Tip number 3. Stop hiding. Following the pattern of being time efficient, you need to stop hiding. This ties into the last 2 tips, where time is of the essence. While you're hiding in a bush, Meg, your teammates are slowly being picked off one by one. There's few things more infuriating than looping a killer for 10 minutes and only 1 gen pops because you brought the killer too close to Dwight and he decided to hop in a locker the whole time. If Dwight were paying attention, he would see that you were in a chase and he would be doing something with his time. Now, I can understand the mindset behind hiding. Dead by Daylight being scary is a pretty common thing to newer players, but once you put more time into the game, it very quickly becomes not scary. Before you know it, you'll be spawning and you'll go after the killer looking for a chase. Tip number 4. Split up on generators. Unless you or the teammate you're on a generator with has the perk Prove Thyself, it's much more efficient to not do the same generator. In Dead by Daylight, there's a thing called the efficiency penalty, where the more survivors on a generator there are, the higher of an efficiency penalty there is, meaning a reduction to generator repairing speed. So, with 2 survivors on 1 generator, there's a negative 15% penalty to repairing speed. This is why I mentioned Prove Thyself, because this negates that negative 15%, but only for 2 survivors. So in the case where there's 3 survivors on a gen with Prove Thyself active, there's still a negative 15% penalty to repairing. I should also mention that killers benefit from multiple people being on the same gen. Perks like Discordance, which directly benefits from it, and other perks like Tinkerer and Bitter Murmur, you could argue, benefit from multiple survivors being on the same gen because the killer gets more information. To get very nerdy, there's a term in psychology called chunking, which is a process by which individual pieces of an information set are bound together into a meaningful whole. If I'm a killer and I know that 2 survivors are together, that's less information for me to have to process versus 4 survivors that are split up. Tip number 5. Take the hit. 2 people with 1 hook is better than 1 person with 2 hooks. Oh, so smart. Taking the hit, or body blocking, ensures that your teammate gets a fighting chance. Best of luck, Michaela. This is why when the killer has the hots for 1 survivor, aka trying to tunnel them out, it's best to try to take a hit for that teammate. And boy, oh boy, does nothing restore your faith in humanity more than when a solo queue teammate takes a hit for you. It definitely takes a bit of practice to be able to take a hit. Sometimes you end up sandbagging your teammate, but it's the thought that counts. However, a successful body block can easily save a game. And that is because once a game becomes a 3v1, it gets significantly harder for survivors. As I said before, the less information the killer has to process, the easier it's going to be to end the game. The more I play this game, the less I'm concerned with surviving, especially in solo queue. I think it's better to play more altruistically and consider your teammates when making decisions. It's much more fun and exciting to go for a save at the endgame collapse than to just leave a random on the hook to get 2 pips and get that much closer to silver 2. Tip number 6. Know how to unhook properly. It takes 90 seconds to do a gen, minus great skill checks and perks and all that, and it takes 60 seconds to go from one hook stage to the next. What I'm saying is, you don't need to instantly go for a save when someone is hooked. Remember, the goal is 5 generators, 2 exit gates. Well, technically you only need 1 gate, but you get the point. If your gen is 70% done and someone just got hooked, you can do what my solo queue teammates do when I'm on the hook and pretend they don't exist. And once you finish that gen, you still have time to go get the save. This is significantly harder when you're not using comms, but eventually you'll understand how much time you have to go get someone off the hook. Speaking of getting someone off the hook, the person with the least hooks should be going for the save. Now, obviously there's some exceptions to that, like if that person is being chased, but you know what I mean. And for the love of all things holy, unless absolutely necessary, do not unhook right in front of the killer. All this does is ensure that the killer's gonna have one more person hooked. Tip number 7, and arguably the most important of them all. Pay attention to your teammates. On January 4th of 2023, Behavior introduced what is called the Survivor Activity HUD. This was a revolutionary update for solo queue survivors. The Survivor HUD now features an indicator that appears whenever they or their teammates engage in an activity. Activities include repairing a generator, being chased by the killer, healing, recovering from the dying state, cleansing or blessing a totem, opening an exit gate, or interacting with a killer's powers. With that Survivor HUD buff, you can damn near just watch that the entire game. It's crazy how much information that gives. Some might argue a little too much information, but I digress. If I'm on a gen and someone is hooked, I can see if my teammates are doing something, let's be honest, and if they're not, I can assume they're going for the save, meaning I can stay on my gen. And that is just one example of a scenario where the status HUD can do absolute wonders. What? So there you have it, my friends. 7 tips to not suck at Survivor. Now go out there and give those killers a run for their money. As always, I'm Crisper. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the fog.